This week on The Watchman, we are on the Israel-Lebanon border in a closed military zone as the battle between Israel and Hamas rages to the south in Gaza. Could a great northern war against Hezbollah be looming?
Hezbollah is going to remain Hezbollah. It was born dedicated to the destruction of Israel. This is what they exist for.
Get the inside story on the ground on the Israel-Lebanon border next. Welcome to The Watchman. We just returned from a very eye-opening trip to Israel, folks. It was the first time that I was on the ground in the land of Israel since the October 7th massacre. Of course, we spent time along the Gaza border. You'll see that in the coming weeks here on The Watchman Show. But we also spent time up north where I believe a great northern war is looming. There have been daily engagements between Israel and the Iran-backed terror group Hezbollah. Hezbollah firing rockets and missiles and Israel responding with airstrikes. It is an absolute tinderbox along the Lebanon border to the point that some 80,000 Israeli residents have been evacuated from that region. They have no idea when they will be able to return home because Hezbollah remains perched on that northern border with every intention of duplicating or even bettering, in their view, the carnage of October 7th. So we thought this would be the perfect time to give you the on-the-ground, first-hand perspective from that Lebanon border. We did exactly that in a closed military zone in which we were granted rare and exclusive access from the Israel Defense Forces. We got the inside story. Here's my interview with IDF spokesman David Baruch on the very volatile situation along the Israel-Lebanon border as Hezbollah continues its attacks. Take a look. Folks, we're here near the Lebanon border with Major David Baruch from the IDF Spokespersons Unit. Major Baruch, thank you so much for taking the time out of a very busy schedule, in particular here up north near the Lebanon border, Hezbollah country. First off, Major, give us a sense of where things stand right now with Hezbollah. We've got these daily exchanges of fire, obviously, between Israel and Hezbollah. Hezbollah firing rockets, anti-tank missiles. Has Hezbollah taken some major lumps, I guess you would say, since they launched against Israel on October 8th?
Absolutely. For the last 4 months since Hamas attacked us in the south, Hezbollah has been trying to take our focus away from our major focus, away from what's going on in the south. Every day they've been shooting missiles, rockets, anti-tank weapons at communities, primarily communities, not even at military targets. And we, from the beginning, have said, we're not interested in this escalating into something else. From the beginning, we've been saying, we want to keep a peaceful border. Yet, if we're attacked, we're going to respond immediately and with force. And that's exactly what we've been doing for the last 4 months. Now, at the same time, many Israeli civilians have moved out of their houses. They've been told to leave. Some have self-evacuated, between 65 and 80,000 people. What that means is people aren't producing, people aren't farming. It's something that is not sustainable over time. We're very much interested in a diplomatic solution, but if that diplomatic solution doesn't come in a reasonable time, then we're going to have to revert to the military.
Israel did not attack Hezbollah.
Exactly.
Israel was attacked almost simultaneously. Like I said, October 7th happens. By October 8th, Hezbollah is launching against Israel, getting in the fray, getting involved, trying to create a second front.
And they've taken a lot of hits, and Hezbollah mothers and fathers are asking the same question. Should we be putting our future, Lebanon's future, at stake for the sake of Hamas in Gaza? So they've been taking a hit as well. We really need to get the situation back to what was beautifully understood as 1701, Security Council Resolution 1701, where Hezbollah won't be south of the Litani River, not along Israel's borders,
About
it's been.
I'm sorry, Major, about 12 miles from here, the Litani River?
It's about that distance.
And you mentioned Resolution 1701. After the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah, the UN was supposed to enforce this resolution. It doesn't seem to have gone too well.
Well, we're finding up until the 6th of October, we've seen Hezbollah. You yourself have seen it as well. Hezbollah right along the border. There's no buffer between us and Hezbollah. And that's what we need to get back. We need to move Hezbollah back farther north, away from our border.
We know about Hezbollah's rocket missile arsenal, at least 150,000, probably more at this point. But those anti-tank missiles seem to be a major threat. Tell us how Hezbollah is using them and why they're so difficult to counter at times.
What is the problem with those? Is they're shot, sight-directed, straight line. Then the Iron Dome goes against ballistic missiles, goes against missiles that go in an arc, and then we can actually find their trajectory and shoot them down. With the missiles going straight right across, with around a 6 kilometer, around 4.5 miles, we're doing everything we can, and we're shooting back, and we're getting actually at their launchers as well. Now, oftentimes these launchers are done by remote control or with timers and not necessarily with people next to them. So it's a problem.
But when we talk about the north where we're standing right now, is it a question not of if, but when Israel is going to be forced to have to take some serious, decisive action, do you believe, against Hezbollah?
We're focusing on Gaza. We're focusing on the south. Yet at the same time, we're more than prepared for any scenario whatsoever. We want a diplomatic solution. If there won't be a diplomatic solution, then we'll have to move to other solutions. And that will be very difficult for us. And I promise you, it'll be even more difficult for Lebanon. And you have to ask once again, is Lebanon willing to risk its future for the sake of what's going on down south with Hamas?
And for the sake of their masters in Tehran, ultimately as well.
The puppet masters.
Yeah. Major David Baruch, thank you so much. And hey, you've been living here for over 30 years. You're a Michigan native in the United States, made Aliyah in the 1980s. You've been here in the spokespersons unit for many years. And hey, we're so appreciative of what you're doing to get the truth out, get the message out, leaving your family every day to come here and fight for the existence of the world's one and only Jewish state. Major Baruch, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. We have no other way of doing it.
That's right. God bless you, my friend. Thank you. We appreciate it. Thanks, Major Baruch. Thanks again to IDF spokesman David Baruch for those great insights. Folks, keep the soldiers, by the way, of the IDF in your prayers. There are many in their 30s and 40s, even family men with wives and kids who are in the Israeli reserves. They've had to leave their families for months at a time and head to the front lines. Not easy, but they're doing what needs to be done to defend the world's one and only Jewish state. One of those IDF reserves is our good friend, Major Elliot Chodoff. He joins us along the Israel-Lebanon border, along the Mediterranean Sea. After the break, you won't want to miss this great analysis. Stick around. Welcome back to The Watchman. We are breaking down our recent trip to Israel. We focused a lot here on the Israel-Lebanon border, the coming, I believe, war against the Iran-backed terror group Hezbollah. But there also remains that very persistent and pressing issue of dozens of Israeli hostages still held in Hamas captivity in Gaza. To break down both issues, why they are so important, and what comes next, we turn to our good friend, IDF Reserve Major Elliot Chodoff. He joined us again in a closed military zone to which we were granted exclusive access from the Israel Defense Forces right along the Israel-Lebanon border and on the Mediterranean Sea. Take a look. Folks, we are on the Israel-Lebanon border. Rosh Hanikra, which is one of the most northernmost points in Israel, is just beyond us. The Mediterranean Sea is behind us, and this is a closed military zone. Again, the Lebanon border is right there, and that means Hezbollah country lurking above us, and tensions continue on a daily basis between Israel and Hezbollah. So We couldn't think of a better person to bring in to break it all down for us, and our good friend Elliot Chodoff, Reserve Major in the Israel Defense Forces, strategic military analyst, expert, and a regular here on the Watchman. Elliot, wish it was under better circumstances, of course. Okay, you and I were talking a bit off camera, and you said, look, we got to talk about these proposed hostage deals with Hamas. What's the latest? Break that down for us.
Well, the latest today is that there's a framework on the table, and I think it's important to say a framework, not an offer, not a deal. It was put together in Paris. Hamas was not part of that, but Israel was, the United States, Qatar, France, of course. And it's a framework of how to go about dealing with the hostage situation. That framework was put to Hamas. Hamas has emphatically not accepted it. They haven't outright rejected it, but emphatically not accepted it. Not
surprisingly. By the way, over 100 hostages that we know still living in Hamas captivity.
Okay, so the official number today is a little over 130. Honestly, I don't believe the number is that high in terms of living hostages. Yeah. And I believe that one of the things that Israel must do, and I would be very disappointed if the government doesn't do this, in whatever deal that we might work out, is to get a comprehensive, detailed list from Hamas of who they're holding and what their status is. In any event, they're holding out. There are two sticking points ultimately that we're going to face. One is that Hamas demands that Israel end its war with Hamas and withdraw its forces from Gaza in order to negotiate any sort of settlement. That's a non-starter as far as Israel's concerned. That means basically giving Hamas its second victory, because its first victory was October 7th. There's no getting around that.
You would leave Hamas alive to fight another day,
alive,
like you said, non-starter.
Intact. And the other, so one is, do we end the war or not? And they're saying if we don't end the war, there's nothing to negotiate. Yeah. The second is, what's the price to pay? And they've made it clear they want everybody being held in Israel released in return for the hostages.
All Hamas
terrorists. Fatah, Jihad, PFLP, all the terrorists, including high-profile Marwan Barghouti, Anwar Sadat.
These are terror masters in Israeli prisons, yes. Deservedly.
Yes.
And Hamas wants them released.
They're in prison having been convicted. In other words, Marwan Barghouti is serving 5 consecutive life terms for murder. And here I think we have to emphasize, this is not a hostage exchange. This is a deal of hostages for terrorists, murderers.
Big difference.
Right, absolutely. It's not a symmetrical trade-off that we're holding some people politically and they're holding hostages.
So how does Israel accomplish this? Look, the two main war aims, number one, bring the hostages home, of course, yes. And number two, destroy Hamas. Can the two both be accomplished?
This is part of Israel's great dilemma today. Israel's facing a moral dilemma and it's facing a strategic dilemma. The moral dilemma is we want to bring the hostages back. Families and friends of hostages, for them, their highest priority, as it should be, I think. Bring my husband, brother, sister, sure. Son, daughter home, and I don't care what it costs. The government, on the other hand, has to care what it costs. For the government, bringing home the hostages is certainly a moral imperative, but it's not the only one. There are other strategic imperatives. We can't turn this around and have this happen again in a year or 2 or 3 or 4. Yeah. We set a very bad precedent with the Shalit deal. We released over 1,000 terrorists, including Sinwar.
Mastermind of October 7th.
October 7th, and others who were involved.
Yeah.
We set a very high bar for them. And we also showed them that there's a value to having hostages. If we can release over 1,000 terrorists for one soldier, what if they're holding over 100? And having done that, we essentially established a high value for hostage taking.
Yeah.
If returning Hamas to power is the price, I don't think the country is willing to pay it. One of the things that is not being talked about are the 300,000 reservists who are still called up, many of them, and some released, like myself, and told, don't get too comfortable at home because we're calling you back, who are saying, you know what, we've already given up this year of our lives. We've lost friends in combat. We are not going home until this is over, until we've done the job, finish the job, and finishing the job means finishing Hamas. So that there's a quieter but very, very potent counterpoint to the issue of the hostages that's going on simultaneously.
Coming up, our good friend Elliot Chodoff stays with us to discuss what this coming great northern war will look like, what are Hezbollah's capabilities, and how will the IDF take on this Iran-backed terror group. That's next. Don't move. This morning, before we came here, folks, again, this is a closed military zone. We have exclusive access granted by the Israel Defense Forces. And again, Lebanon, Hezbollah, a stone's throw away, right over yonder there. Another very difficult situation, Elliot, with not a lot of easy answers, I guess you would say. What's the latest on these daily battles? This is a second front between Israel and Hezbollah.
I think there are a number of reasons for what we're seeing. I believe that Hezbollah was planning to come in the aftermath of the attack on the 7th. Hamas actually claims that they had agreed to go in on the 7th, and they reneged at the last moment.
Wow. So this is going to be a two-front invasion.
Attack. I do believe that they did plan to go in the immediate aftermath. Israel was seen as weak. I believe that they, with Iran, thought that a two-front attack would shatter Israel. Israel would be paralyzed. It wouldn't be able to respond to either one, etc. Israel did a number of things that were critical in stabilizing this border. One was that on the 7th already, the government declared that we're at war, and that's significant. Two, also on the 7th, that morning, the protest leaders said this protest is on hold, everybody goes. You get called up because there was talk about people refusing to serve. You get called, you go. Country's in danger, high priority. In the next days, Israel mobilized between 300,000 and 400,000 reservists. In the largest call-up in Israel's history, numerically, and the fastest in Israel's history. And suddenly Hezbollah is not facing a strung-out single division along the border, which was the case before. Now it's facing multiple divisions on high alert, ready to go to war. And the decision was made to evacuate the population within a few kilometers of the border to remove them from an immediate vulnerable threat from Hezbollah. And now suddenly Hezbollah's plans are shattered. They can't simply sit there and do nothing. We're beating Hamas up badly in Gaza. They can't just sit back and say, well, we're going to let it happen. So they've launched a static fire war against Israel along the border. They've done a lot of damage, by the way, particularly with anti-tank missiles to houses, structures, buildings all along the border in villages and towns. We at the same time are pounding them heavily with air and artillery. We've killed some 200 of them so far, which is an insignificant number to the organization. We've done a lot of damage to their infrastructure in the south, but let's make no mistake. We have not done strategic damage to them. In other words, they are still as powerful as they always were if they want to launch an attack against them.
And real quick, do you see this as being an inevitable great northern war that's coming?
Hezbollah is going to remain Hezbollah. It was born dedicated to the destruction of Israel. This is what they exist for. Any sort of quasi-agreement that moves Hezbollah 6, 7, 8, 10 kilometers back from the border is nonsense. We already had that. We did that after 2006.
That's right.
And they infiltrated back. And there's a UN resolution, 1701, ignored.
A joke.
UNIFIL, it's been a joke since 1978 when it was created. Hezbollah needs to be driven back. It needs to be defanged. And I believe that ultimately we're going to have to do that, whether we do it in this round or another round. I think this round is the time, and not because I'm a warmonger, but because we're already mobilized. The country is already on a war footing.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, as you can see and feel by the weather, and you've been here a few days, it's been raining nonstop for
chilly.
A couple of weeks.
Yes, it is, yeah.
I don't believe that we will initiate a major operation in Lebanon before the rainy season is over, unless we have to. We can do it, but prefer not to. Bad weather favors the defender, but I believe that if we initiate it, we're not going to initiate it in the coming weeks. again, until the weather moves into a much more conducive environment.
No, it makes sense, Elliot, and you would know, of course, and it seems to be ultimately a question not of if but when. What a great breakdown from the one and only Elliot Chodoff, our good friend. Stay safe, my friend, and we will have you back, of course, with more breakdowns on the situation in the world's most volatile and strategic region, the Middle East, and we're in the heart of it right now. Elliot, thank you so much. We appreciate it as always, my friend. Great job. Thanks, Elliot. Appreciate it, man. Thanks again to our good friend Elliot Chodoff for that great breakdown. Coming up after the break, my final thoughts on what the Bible says about this great northern war and an exciting announcement, a brand new program coming here to TBN. Stick around. Welcome back. As we wrap up here, this looming great northern war that we've spent this entire episode talking about really should come as no surprise if you look at the history of the land of Israel. The book of Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 14 says that out of the north, calamity shall break forth on all the inhabitants of the land. Folks, a member of Israel's Knesset brought that verse to my attention a few years ago, and it has stuck with me. Historically, many times, Israel's great enemies have come from the north. No different, of course, with what we see in Lebanon right now in the form of Hezbollah, and of course, that looming Ezekiel war, the war of Gog and Magog laid out in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. Here's the good news. The God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, still sits on the throne, and when it comes to his land and his people, he neither slumbers nor sleeps. Here's some more good news for you as we close. If you like the Watchman show, and we've been coming to you here on TBN for 8 years, hard to believe, get ready. March 25th, Stakelbeck Tonight. We're launching here on TBN every weeknight, Monday through Friday, twice per night, 7:30 and 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be bringing you stories from around the world, of course, including Israel and the Middle East and beyond for such a time as this. Cutting-edge news every night from a biblical perspective. Mark your calendars. That's March 25th right here on TBN, the launch of Stakelbeck Tonight. In the meantime, thanks so much for joining us this week here on The Watchman. Till next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.